Sarah left the school at exactly 3:30, just as she had every day for the past week. Marcus watched from 3 blocks away as she got into her Honda Civic and began driving toward the grocery store on 5th Street. Tommy followed at a discreet distance in his rental car, while Jake and Rodriguez were already positioned at the target location. Alpha Team, this is Marcus. Package is mobile and heading your way. Copy that, Jake's voice came through the earpiece. Overwatch is in position. No signs of hostile surveillance yet. Rodriguez here. Electronics are active. We're recording everything from multiple angles. Marcus felt the familiar calm that came with military operations. Every variable was controlled, every team member knew their role, and all possible outcomes had been planned for. The only unknown was exactly how Vincent Carrera would make his move. Sarah arrived at the grocery store and parked near the front entrance, just as they had rehearsed. She took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, and walked toward the automatic doors. Marcus could see her hands trembling slightly, but she was following the plan perfectly. Tommy maintained close protection. Stay within 20 feet of the package at all times. Roger, I'm moving into the store now. Marcus positioned his vehicle where he could see both the parking lot and the street approaches. His military training had taught him that the most dangerous moment in any operation was when the enemy thought they had the advantage. 15 minutes passed. Sarah was genuinely shopping, buying groceries they actually needed, making the operation look completely natural. Marcus was beginning to wonder if Carrera had gotten suspicious when Rodriguez's voice crackled through the earpiece. Movement on the south approach. Black sedan, 2 occupants. Matches the description from previous surveillance. Marcus felt his pulse steady into the familiar rhythm of combat operations. Jake, do you have visual? Confirmed. Black sedan just pulled into the far corner of the parking lot. Vincent Carrera is in the passenger seat. The driver appears to be armed. Package is still inside the store, Tommy reported. Should I move her to checkout? Negative. Let them make their play. We need clear documentation of their intentions. Marcus watched as Carrera and his associate exited their vehicle and began walking toward the grocery store. Carrera was wearing the same expensive suit Sarah had described, and even from a distance, Marcus could see the scar on his chin. Rodriguez, are you getting this? Crystal clear. High-definition video from 3 angles. This is going to be excellent evidence. The 2 men entered the store and Marcus could hear Tommy's updates through the earpiece. Hostiles are inside. They're not shopping, they're hunting. Moving through the aisles systematically, looking for the package. Sarah was in the produce section, carefully selecting apples as if she had no idea she was being stalked. Marcus felt a surge of pride at his wife's courage. She was performing her role perfectly despite the obvious danger. Package is moving toward checkout, Tommy reported. Hostiles have spotted her and are moving to intercept. This was the critical moment. Marcus started his engine and moved closer to the store entrance. All units maintain positions. Let them reveal their intentions. Through the store windows, Marcus could see Carrera approaching Sarah at the checkout line. The criminal was trying to look casual, but his body language screamed predator. He positioned himself behind Sarah in line, close enough to grab her if necessary. Marcus heard Sarah's voice through Tommy's hidden microphone as Carrera spoke to her. Excuse me, aren't you the teacher from Riverside Elementary? Sarah turned around, and Marcus could see her recognize Carrera immediately. But instead of showing fear, she smiled politely. Yes, I teach kindergarten there. Do I know you? I'm Vincent Carrera. I think we need to talk about something you saw a few weeks ago. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean. Carrera's voice became more threatening. I think you do, lady. You saw something outside your school that you shouldn't have seen. Now you need to come with me so we can discuss keeping your mouth shut about it. I'm not going anywhere with you, Sarah said firmly, loud enough for the hidden microphones to pick up clearly. Carrera grabbed Sarah's arm, exactly as the fake police officers had done 3 nights earlier. Yes, you are. And if you make a scene, a lot of innocent people in this store are going to get hurt. That was all Marcus needed to hear. Carrera had just threatened his wife and innocent civilians on camera. The trap had worked perfectly. All units, the hostile has just committed assault and made terroristic threats. Move in now. Marcus burst through the store entrance just as Tommy revealed himself near the checkout counter. Jake and Rodriguez came through the rear emergency exit, cutting off any escape route. Carrera saw the coordinated movement and immediately realized he had walked into a trap. His associate reached for his weapon, But Jake was already behind him with a gun pressed against his neck. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Jake said calmly. Carrera released Sarah's arm and looked around frantically. 4 trained Special Forces operators had him completely surrounded, and there was nowhere to run. "Vincent Carrera," Marcus said, walking up to the man who had threatened his family. "I believe you wanted to have a conversation with my wife. Let's have that conversation." Carrera's face went pale as he realized who Marcus was. "You're the Navy SEAL, that's correct. And you just made the mistake of threatening my family in front of multiple cameras with perfect audio recording." Tommy was already calling Detective Hayes while Rodriguez secured the evidence. The entire attempted kidnapping had been documented in high definition from multiple angles. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus continued, his voice deadly calm. "You're going to be arrested for attempted kidnapping, assault, and terroristic threats. The evidence is overwhelming and completely admissible in court. Your alibi for the previous attempt just became worthless." Carrera looked around desperately. "You don't understand. The Castellano family has resources you can't imagine. This isn't over." Marcus stepped closer until he was inches from Carrera's face. "Let me explain something to you about resources. You have money and criminals. I have training, experience, and a team of the most elite warriors in the world. If your family wants to continue this fight, they're welcome to try. But I promise you it won't end the way they expect." Police sirens were approaching as Detective Hayes arrived with backup units. Marcus stepped back and allowed the legal system to take over, but his message had been delivered clearly. 3 hours later, Vincent Carrera was in custody with no possibility of bail. The video evidence was so clear and compelling that his lawyer immediately began discussing plea bargain options. The attempted kidnapping at the grocery store, combined with Sarah's testimony about the original murder, provided enough evidence to bring down several high-ranking members of the Castellano crime family. That evening, Marcus and Sarah sat on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Jake, Tommy, and Rodriguez had returned to their normal lives, but Marcus knew they would always be available if needed. "Is it really over?" Sarah asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. Marcus held her close. "Vincent Carrera will be in prison for a very long time. His organization has been dismantled, and everyone in their world now knows what happens when you threaten a Navy SEAL's family." Sarah smiled. "I have to admit, having my own personal Special Forces team was pretty impressive." Marcus laughed. "Just remember, if anyone ever bothers you again, you married someone who has very particular skills and very loyal friends." As they watched their quiet neighborhood settle into evening calm, Marcus reflected on how quickly their peaceful civilian life had been disrupted and then restored. The criminals who had targeted his wife had learned a valuable lesson. Some people should never be threatened, and some families are protected by forces they couldn't possibly understand. The fake cops who had started this whole ordeal were serving long prison sentences. Vincent Carrera would never see freedom again, and the Castellano crime family had decided that testifying witnesses were less dangerous than provoking Navy SEALs. Marcus Thompson had successfully protected his family and helped bring down an entire criminal organization. Most importantly, Sarah could return to teaching kindergarten without fear, and their quiet suburban life could continue exactly as it should. Sometimes the best defense was overwhelming offense, and sometimes the most dangerous enemies were the ones who looked like ordinary people, living ordinary lives. The criminals had learned that lesson too late, but they had learned it permanently. Marcus arrived at Riverside Elementary to find 2 police cars in the parking lot, and Sarah waiting in the principal's office with a security guard. The strange man who had been asking questions about her had left before police arrived, but not before several staff members got a good look at him. He claimed to be from the district office, Principal Martinez explained as Marcus sat down with Sarah, but when we asked for identification, he became nervous and left quickly. Our secretary said he had an expensive suit and a scar on his chin. Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. Vincent Carrera was getting bolder, which meant he was also getting more desperate. The failed kidnapping attempt had probably put pressure on him from his criminal organization. They needed Sarah silenced, and time was running out. On the drive home, Marcus's phone rang. It was Jake Sullivan, his former SEAL team leader, calling from the airport. "Marcus, we just landed. Tommy and Rodriguez are with me." "Where do you want to meet?" "Come to the house. We need to discuss security arrangements and information gathering." Sarah looked concerned. "Marcus, you called in your old team? Isn't that a bit extreme?" Marcus pulled into their driveway and turned to face his wife. Sarah, honey, this isn't just about one criminal trying to intimidate you. This is about a powerful crime family that sees you as a threat to their entire operation. They have unlimited money, dozens of professional criminals, and no moral boundaries. I'm not taking any chances with your safety. Within an hour, 3 men in civilian clothes arrived at the Thompson house. Jake Sullivan was a tall man with graying hair and intense blue eyes. Tommy Chen was smaller, but moved with the fluid grace of someone trained in hand-to-hand combat. Rodriguez was the team's former communications specialist, now working in private security. Sarah made coffee while the 4 men spread maps and documents across the dining room table. To anyone watching from outside, it looked like a friendly reunion. In reality, it was a military planning session. Okay, Marcus, bring us up to speed, Jake said. Marcus explained the situation, showing them photographs of Vincent Carrera and the information detective Hayes had provided about the Castellano crime family. So we have a professional killer with organizational backing who needs to eliminate a witness, Rodriguez summarized. And local law enforcement is hoping the legal system moves fast enough to protect her. What's the timeline on the trial? Tommy asked. 2 weeks, but Carrera isn't going to wait 2 weeks. He's already tried once and now he's escalating to direct surveillance at Sarah's workplace. Jake studied the maps of the neighborhood and school. Marcus, what are you thinking for defensive strategy? First priority is protecting Sarah. Second priority is gathering intelligence on Carrera's operations so we can predict his next move. Third priority is making sure this threat is eliminated permanently. Sarah sat down with them, carrying a tray of coffee. Gentlemen, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't live in hiding for 2 weeks. I have responsibilities at school and my students need me. Jake looked at her with respect. Ma'am, we understand. But we also need you to understand that Vincent Carrera has killed at least 6 people. He's not going to be discouraged by security guards or police presence. So what do you suggest? Marcus leaned forward. We're going to set a trap. Everyone looked at him. Explain, Jake said. Carrera needs to get to Sarah, but he can't do it while she's surrounded by protection. So we're going to give him an opportunity that looks perfect, but is actually completely controlled by us. Marcus pointed to the map. Tomorrow afternoon, Sarah will leave school at her usual time. She'll drive to the grocery store on 5th Street. It's isolated with limited security cameras and perfect for an ambush. Carrera will see it as the ideal opportunity. Except we'll be ready for him, Tommy said, understanding the plan. Exactly. Jake and Rodriguez will be positioned with Overwatch. Tommy will be close protection for Sarah. I'll be mobile, ready to respond to any threat. Sarah looked nervous. You want me to be bait? Marcus took her hand. I want you to help us end this threat permanently. If we wait for Carrera to choose the time and place, we're always going to be reactive. This way we control every variable. Rodriguez was studying traffic patterns on his laptop. The grocery store is good tactically. Only 2 main entrances, clear sight lines, and we can position assets to cover all approaches. Jake nodded. What about legal complications? If this goes wrong, we could all face serious charges. I've thought about that, Marcus said. We're not going to ambush Carrera. We're going to protect Sarah and gather evidence. If he approaches her aggressively or attempts another kidnapping, we'll have everything documented. And if he comes armed, Marcus's expression grew cold. Then we'll respond appropriately to protect an innocent civilian from an armed criminal. The next morning, Marcus received a call from Detective Hayes. We have a problem. Vincent Carrera's lawyer is claiming his client has an alibi for the night of your attempted kidnapping. They're saying Carrera was in Atlantic City at a casino. Let me guess, the casino has surveillance footage showing him there? Exactly. Either Carrera has a very good body double, or the Castellano family has enough influence to manufacture fake evidence. Marcus wasn't surprised. Criminal organizations with that level of power had resources most people couldn't imagine, but they also had weaknesses, and Marcus was about to exploit those weaknesses. Linda, hypothetically, if Carrera were to attempt another crime against my wife, and if that crime were to be documented with clear video evidence showing his face, would that alibi problem disappear? Detective Hayes was quiet for a moment. Hypothetically, yes. Clear video evidence of Vincent Carrera committing a crime would override any alibi claims. Good to know. That afternoon, as Sarah prepared to leave school, Marcus made final preparations for the trap they had set. Jake and Rodriguez were already in position at the grocery store. Tommy was waiting in the school parking lot disguised as a parent picking up his child. Marcus checked his weapons one final time and climbed into his surveillance vehicle. Vincent Carrera wanted to play games with a kindergarten teacher. He was about to discover that her husband played much more dangerous games, and he always won. The next morning, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and 3 manila folders spread out in front of him. He had spent most of the night on the phone with his former SEAL teammates and contacts in law enforcement. If someone wanted to play games with his family, Marcus was going to make sure he had all the information he needed to end those games permanently. Sarah was at work, though Marcus had wanted her to stay home. She insisted that hiding wouldn't solve anything, and besides, the school had excellent security. Marcus had personally driven her to work and spoken with the principal about the situation. Extra security guards would be present, and Sarah would not leave the building without Marcus picking her up personally. Detective Hayes knocked on the front door at exactly 9 o'clock. She carried a briefcase and wore the serious expression of someone who had discovered troubling information. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said, as he led her into the house. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room until we figure out how to handle it." They sat in the living room and Detective Hayes opened her briefcase. "We got Rick Torres and Dave Miller to talk. What they told us is concerning." She pulled out several photographs and documents. "The man who hired them is named Vincent Carrera. He's a mid-level enforcer for the Castellano crime family. They primarily deal in construction, waste management, and government contracts." Marcus studied the photographs. Vincent Carrera was indeed the man Sarah had described from the coffee shop. Tall, expensive suit, scar on his chin. What would a crime family want with Sarah? "That's where it gets interesting," Detective Hayes said. 3 weeks ago, there was a shooting outside the Riverside Elementary School. Remember? It happened just after dismissal time. Marcus nodded. Sarah mentioned it. She said the police told everyone it was gang-related and not to worry about it. We said that to avoid panic, but it wasn't gang-related. It was a professional hit. The target was a man named Anthony Ricci, who was walking past the school when he was killed. Ricci was an accountant who had been secretly gathering evidence of financial crimes within the Castellano organization. Detective Hayes pulled out more documents. Here's the problem. Sarah Thompson was one of the witnesses who saw the shooting. She was walking to her car when it happened and gave a statement to the responding officers. Marcus felt his blood run cold. What kind of statement? She described seeing a man in a dark suit shooting Ricci from a black sedan. She also mentioned seeing the license plate, clearly because she was trained, to notice details from her years of working with children. Teachers are taught to observe and remember everything for safety reasons. And this Vincent Carrera was the shooter? We believe so. Sarah's description matches him perfectly, and her license plate information led us to a car registered under one of his known aliases. But here's the crucial part. Sarah doesn't realize how important her testimony is. Detective Hayes leaned forward. Marcus, your wife is probably the only witness who can positively identify Vincent Carrera as the shooter. Everyone else who saw the incident was either too far away or too frightened to give clear details. Without her testimony, the prosecution's case against the entire Castellano organization falls apart. Marcus stood up and began pacing. So they tried to kidnap her to either silence her or intimidate her into not testifying. Exactly. And since last night's attempt failed, they're going to try again. The Castellano family has too much at stake to let one witness destroy their entire operation. Marcus stopped pacing and looked directly at Detective Hayes. What's the prosecution timeline? The trial starts in 2 weeks. We need Sarah's testimony to convict not just Vincent Carrera, but several high-ranking members of the organization. This case could effectively dismantle one of the most powerful crime families in the region. And until then, my wife is a target. Detective Hayes nodded grimly. We can offer witness protection, but honestly, Marcus, that would mean Sarah disappears for months, maybe years. She'd have to leave her job, her friends, her entire life here. Marcus sat back down, his mind racing through options. He had faced difficult tactical situations before, but this was different. This wasn't a military mission with clear objectives and rules of engagement. This was his civilian life, his wife's safety, and a criminal organization with unlimited resources and no moral boundaries. There's something else, Detective Hayes said quietly. Vincent Carrera has a reputation for being extremely violent and persistent. He's suspected in at least 6 murders over the past 3 years. The man doesn't give up and he doesn't leave loose ends. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah. Strange man asking questions about me at school. Security handled it, but I'm worried. Marcus showed the message to Detective Hayes, who immediately called for additional police units to be sent to the school. They're escalating, Marcus said. First the fake cops, now they're trying to get to her at work. Marcus, I have to ask, what are you thinking of doing? I can see that look in your eyes, and while I understand your desire to protect Sarah, we need to handle this through proper legal channels. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Linda, I spent 8 years in the Navy SEALs. I've conducted dozens of high-risk operations against dangerous enemies, but I've always operated within military law and rules of engagement. He paused, looking out the window toward the school where his wife worked. However, Vincent Carrera and the Castellano family just declared war on my family. They've threatened to kidnap my wife, and now they're stalking her at her workplace. At what point does this stop being a police matter and start being a matter of personal defense? Detective Hayes understood the position Marcus was in, but she also knew how dangerous it could become if a trained special forces operator decided to take matters into his own hands. Marcus, I need your word that you won't do anything illegal. Let us handle this investigation. We're closing in on the entire organization. Marcus nodded, but Detective Hayes could see he was holding something back. I won't do anything illegal, Linda, but I also won't let anyone hurt Sarah while we wait for the legal system to work. After Detective Hayes left, Marcus made several phone calls. By noon, 3 of his former SEAL teammates were on their way to Riverside Heights. If the Castellano crime family wanted to play hardball with the military family, they were about to discover that some games had consequences they never imagined. Marcus looked at the clock and realized it was time to pick up Sarah from school. As he grabbed his keys, he made a mental note to start carrying his sidearm again. The quiet suburban life he had been enjoying was officially over. Now it was time to remind some criminals why you should never threaten a Navy SEAL's family. The 2 fake officers lay on the ground, groaning and clutching their injured arms. Marcus kept both weapons pointed at them, while Sarah moved to a safe distance. The neighborhood had come alive with activity. Porch lights were turning on, and Marcus could hear sirens in the distance. Mrs. Chen had definitely called the real police. Sarah, honey, can you grab some zip ties from my toolbox in the garage? Marcus asked calmly. These gentlemen aren't going anywhere until we get some answers. As Sarah hurried to the garage, Marcus studied his prisoners more carefully. Now that he had time to really look at them, he could see their fake uniforms were good quality but not perfect. The badges were slightly off, and their equipment wasn't standard issue for the local police department. The taller man tried to sit up, wincing in pain. You broke my arm, you psycho. Marcus shook his head. No, I dislocated your elbow. It's painful but not permanent damage, although that can change if you don't start answering questions. We don't have to tell you anything, the shorter man said, though his voice lacked any real conviction. Marcus smiled coldly. You're absolutely right. You don't have to tell me anything, but here's what's going to happen. The real police will be here in about 3 minutes. You're going to be arrested for impersonating police officers, attempted kidnapping, assault, and probably several other charges. That's looking at serious prison time. Sarah returned with the zip ties, and Marcus quickly secured both men's hands behind their backs with military precision. They struggled briefly but stopped when they realized how futile it was. However, Marcus continued, if you cooperate with me now, I might be willing to put in a good word with the real officers when they arrive. I might even suggest that you were just confused individuals who made some very poor choices tonight. The fake officers exchanged glances. Marcus could see they were weighing their options, trying to decide if cooperation might reduce their punishment. Let me help you make this decision, Marcus said. First question, what are your real names? The shorter man hesitated, then said, I'm Rick Torres. This is Dave Miller. Good, that's progress. Now, Rick, why were you trying to kidnap my wife? Rick's eyes darted nervously. We weren't trying to kidnap anybody. We were supposed to bring her in for questioning. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Bring her in where? And on whose authority? Dave Miller, still nursing his injured elbow, spoke up. Look, man, we were just doing a job, okay? Someone paid us to pick up your wife and bring her to a warehouse across town. We were told she had information about something. What kind of information? Sarah asked, stepping closer despite Marcus's protective gesture. We don't know, Rick said quickly. The guy who hired us didn't give details. He just said your wife had seen something she shouldn't have and he needed to talk to her about it. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't a random crime or even a simple kidnapping for ransom. Someone specifically wanted Sarah because of something she had witnessed. That made this situation far more dangerous than he had initially thought. The sirens were getting louder now. 3 police cars rounded the corner, their lights flashing in the growing darkness. Marcus carefully placed both weapons on the ground and raised his hands slightly, making sure the real officers could see he wasn't a threat. Detective Linda Hayes was the first out of her car. Marcus knew her from community events. She was a 20-year veteran with a reputation for being thorough and fair. She quickly assessed the scene. 2 men zip-tied on the ground, Marcus and Sarah standing nearby, and fake police uniforms scattered around. "Marcus, what happened here?" Detective Hayes asked, her hand resting on her weapon but not drawing it. "Linda, thank goodness you're here," Marcus said. These 2 men impersonated police officers and attempted to kidnap Sarah. They had fake uniforms, a fake patrol car, and weapons. I had to subdue them to protect my wife. Detective Hayes looked at the fake patrol car parked in the driveway. Even from a distance, she could see it wasn't quite right. Did they say why they were targeting Sarah? They claimed someone hired them to bring her to a warehouse for questioning. Apparently, Sarah witnessed something that made someone very nervous. Sarah stepped forward, looking confused and frightened. "But I don't understand. I haven't seen anything unusual. I teach kindergarten. I go to work, come home, and sometimes stop at the grocery store. What could I have possibly witnessed?" Detective Hayes began taking statements while other officers secured the scene and arrested Rick and Dave. The fake patrol car turned out to be a stolen vehicle that had been modified to look like a police cruiser. The weapons were illegal, and both men had extensive criminal records. As the investigation continued, Marcus pulled Sarah aside. "Honey, I need you to think carefully. In the past few weeks, have you noticed anything strange? Anyone following you? Unusual vehicles in the school parking lot? People asking questions about you?" Sarah thought for several minutes. "Well, there was one thing. Last Friday after school, I stopped at the coffee shop on Maple Street. There was a man there who seemed to be watching me. He had dark hair and was wearing a business suit. When I looked at him directly, he quickly looked away and left. Can you describe him in more detail? He was tall, maybe in his 40s, with expensive clothes. He had a scar on his chin and was driving a black sedan. I thought it was strange at the time, but I figured I was just being paranoid." Marcus felt his protective instincts heighten even further. "Sarah, what day last week did you stay late at school?" "Wednesday and Thursday. I was working on lesson plans for the spring semester." "What route do you take home when you stay late?" Sarah described her usual path, which took her past several businesses and through a residential area. Marcus realized that someone had been studying her routine, learning her patterns and planning this kidnapping attempt carefully. Detective Hayes returned with more information. "Marcus, this is bigger than we initially thought. The fake car has been used in at least 3 other crimes in the past month, and both of these men have connections to a criminal organization that specializes in intimidation and extortion." "What kind of organization?" Marcus asked. "The kind that works for people with serious money and serious problems. Someone wanted your wife badly enough to hire professional criminals and provide them with expensive fake equipment." Marcus looked at Sarah, seeing the fear in her eyes. This wasn't over. Tonight was just the beginning. Someone powerful wanted his wife, and they had enough resources to make another attempt. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. Marcus Thompson was a Navy SEAL who had spent years protecting his country from dangerous enemies. Now someone had made this personal by threatening his family. As he held Sarah close and watched the police finish their investigation, Marcus was already planning how to find out who was behind this attack and make sure they never threatened his wife again. Marcus kept his voice steady and calm, but his eyes never left the man's hand that was gripping Sarah's arm. "Officer, please remove your hand from my wife. There's no need for physical contact." The taller fake cop tightened his grip and sneered. "I'll decide what's necessary. Your wife is coming with us for questioning." That's when Marcus knew this wasn't just a random crime. These men had specifically targeted Sarah, and they had a plan to take her somewhere. His military training kicked into high gear as he assessed the threat level. 2 armed men, probably with backup nearby, using intimidation and fake authority to kidnap his wife. This was a tactical situation that required immediate action. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen. Marcus said quietly. His tone was so calm it was almost conversational. But anyone with military experience would have recognized the deadly promise underneath those words. The shorter officer pulled out his weapon and pointed it at Marcus. "Back off right now or I'll drop you where you stand." Marcus didn't even flinch. He had faced down actual terrorists with real military weapons. Two criminals with handguns in his own driveway were not going to intimidate him. Instead, he smiled slightly, and that smile made both fake officers suddenly nervous. "Do you gentlemen know what a Navy SEAL is?" Marcus asked casually, as if they were discussing the weather. The question caught them off guard. The shorter one kept his gun trained on Marcus but looked confused. "What kind of stupid question is that?" "It's not stupid at all," Marcus replied. "You see, a Navy SEAL is someone who has been trained to handle situations exactly like this one. We learn how to disarm multiple attackers, how to use their own weapons against them, and how to do it all while protecting innocent people. It's really quite fascinating." While he was talking, Marcus was studying their positions, their weapons, their body language. He could see that the shorter man's gun hand was shaking slightly, a sign of nervousness that would slow his reaction time. The taller man was still gripping Sarah's arm, which limited his mobility and made him predictable. Sarah understood what was happening. Her husband was not just talking, he was preparing. She had heard enough of his military stories to know that Marcus was at his most dangerous when he seemed most relaxed. "You're crazy if you think we're scared of some military tough guy," the taller fake cop said, but his voice betrayed his growing uncertainty. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That's interesting. You know what I learned in the military? The most dangerous criminals are usually the ones who underestimate their targets. For example, you two made several critical mistakes tonight. Shut up and get on the ground," the shorter man yelled, waving his gun. "First mistake," Marcus continued, ignoring the weapon completely. "You chose the wrong neighborhood. This is a quiet area where gunshots would immediately attract attention. Second mistake, you didn't properly research your target. If you had, you would have known that Sarah Thompson is married to someone with very specific skills." The fake officers were starting to look genuinely worried. Marcus's complete lack of fear in the face of their weapons was unnerving them. They had probably used these same intimidation tactics successfully many times before, but they had never encountered someone who had been trained to handle armed confrontations. "Third mistake," Marcus said, taking a small step forward. "You're treating this like a simple robbery or assault, but when you threaten a Navy SEAL's family, it becomes something entirely different. It becomes a military operation." The shorter man's gun was now shaking noticeably. "Stay back! I'll shoot." Marcus looked at him with something that might have been pity. "No, you won't, and do you know why? Because if you fire that weapon, you'll have about 3 seconds before I disarm you and turn it on your partner. Then I'll have to decide whether to call the real police or handle this situation myself. And trust me, you really don't want me to handle it myself." Sarah could see her neighbors starting to peer out their windows. Mr. Peterson from next door was standing on his porch, clearly concerned about what was happening. Mrs. Chen from across the street was talking on her phone, probably calling the real police. The taller fake cop seemed to realize their plan was falling apart. "Come on, man. This wasn't supposed to be complicated. Just grab the woman and go." His partner's eyes widened in panic. "Shut up, don't say anything." Marcus's expression grew even more dangerous. "Grab the woman and go? So this is a kidnapping operation. That's very interesting information." Now both criminals were backing away slightly, but they were trapped by their own fake authority. They couldn't just run without losing face, but they were clearly realizing they had picked the wrong target. "You have exactly 10 seconds to release my wife and leave my property," Marcus said. His voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried more menace than all their shouting and threats. The shorter man made the worst possible decision. Panicking, he swung his gun toward Sarah, thinking he could use her as a shield. That was the moment Marcus Thompson stopped talking and started acting. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but to the fake officers it felt like slow motion. Marcus moved with the fluid precision of someone who had practiced these movements thousands of times. He stepped forward and to the side, using a technique that put him inside the shorter man's weapon range while simultaneously grabbing the gun barrel and twisting it away from everyone. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the air as Marcus's other hand struck the fake officer's wrist with surgical precision, causing him to release the gun completely. In the same flowing motion, Marcus pivoted and struck the taller man's elbow, forcing him to release Sarah's arm with a yelp of pain. Both criminals found themselves disarmed and on the ground before they fully understood what had happened. Marcus stood over them, holding both their weapons, looking completely calm while they groaned in pain and confusion. Sarah ran to his side, and Marcus put a protective arm around her while keeping the weapons trained on the two men. "Now then," Marcus said pleasantly, as if nothing unusual had just occurred. "I believe we need to have a much longer conversation about who you really are and who sent you." Marcus Thompson had been home from his Navy SEAL deployment for exactly 3 weeks when everything changed. The quiet suburban neighborhood of Riverside Heights seemed like paradise after months of dangerous missions overseas. He spent his days working on the house, fixing the fence, and enjoying simple moments with his wife, Sarah. She was a kindergarten teacher with bright eyes and a laugh that could light up any room. They had been married for 5 years, and Marcus still felt like the luckiest man alive every time he looked at her. That Tuesday evening started like any other. Sarah had stayed late at school to prepare for the next day's lessons. Marcus was in the garage organizing his tools and thinking about the small vacation they were planning. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft orange and pink colors. He could hear children playing in the distance and the familiar sounds of neighbors coming home from work. Around 8 o'clock, Marcus heard a car pull into their driveway. The engine sounded different from Sarah's Honda Civic. He walked to the window and saw a police cruiser parked behind Sarah's car. 2 officers were already at the front door, and Sarah was standing between them. Even from a distance, Marcus could see something was wrong. Sarah's shoulders were tense and she kept looking around nervously. Marcus quickly walked to the front of the house, his military training automatically making him observe everything. The officers looked official enough, but something felt off. Their uniforms seemed slightly wrong, and their patrol car, while convincing, had small details that didn't match the local police department vehicles he was familiar with. As he got closer, he could hear their conversation. The taller officer, a man with cold gray eyes and a thick mustache, was speaking in an aggressive tone. "Ma'am, we have reports of suspicious activity at this address. We need to search your vehicle and your home immediately." Sarah's voice was shaking as she replied, "I don't understand. What kind of suspicious activity? Can I see some identification, please?" The shorter officer, who had dark hair and a scar on his left cheek, stepped closer to Sarah in a way that made Marcus's protective instincts flare up. "You don't need to see anything, lady. We're the police and you're going to cooperate or this is going to get much worse for you." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He had seen enough interrogations during his military service to recognize intimidation tactics. These men were using fear and authority to pressure his wife, and their approach was completely wrong for legitimate police work. Real officers would have shown proper identification immediately and explained the situation clearly. He stepped out of the shadows and walked calmly toward the group. "Good evening, officers. I'm Marcus Thompson. This is my wife and my house. Can you explain what this is about?" The taller officer looked annoyed at Marcus's appearance. He sized him up quickly, noting Marcus's muscular build and confident posture. "Sir, we're conducting official police business. Please step back and let us handle this." Marcus didn't move. His years of training had taught him to read people, and everything about these 2 men screamed danger. Their body language was aggressive rather than professional. Their eyes kept darting around nervously. Most importantly, they were treating Sarah like a criminal instead of a citizen they were sworn to protect. "I'd be happy to step back once you show proper identification and explain what law my wife has allegedly broken," Marcus said calmly. His voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had led men in combat situations. The shorter officer's hand moved toward his weapon. "Sir, you're interfering with a police investigation. I suggest you go back inside before this situation escalates." That's when Marcus knew for certain these men weren't real police officers. No legitimate cop would threaten a homeowner for asking reasonable questions on his own property. His mind started working through possibilities. Were they robbers using fake uniforms? Were they targeting Sarah specifically? Had they been watching the house? Sarah caught Marcus's eye and he could see the fear there. She had also realized something was very wrong. The fake officers seemed to be growing more impatient and aggressive by the minute. Marcus knew he needed to protect his wife, but he also needed to be smart about it. These men were armed and potentially dangerous. "Sarah, honey, why don't you go inside and get these officers some water? I'm sure we can sort this out," Marcus said, giving her a meaningful look. It was a signal they had discussed before. If he ever told her to get water for unexpected visitors, it meant she should go inside, lock the door, and call for real help. Sarah understood immediately. "Of course. I'll be right back," she said, moving toward the house. The taller officer grabbed her arm roughly. "She stays right here. Nobody's going anywhere until we finish our search." That was the moment Marcus Thompson, trained Navy SEAL and decorated veteran, decided these fake cops had made their biggest mistake. The man who had completed some of the military's most dangerous missions, who had protected his country in hostile territories around the world, was not going to let anyone threaten his wife in their own driveway. Marcus's expression didn't change, but Sarah could see the subtle shift in his posture. She had lived with him long enough to recognize when her husband switched from civilian mode to warrior mode. It was like watching a completely different person emerge. Someone calm, calculating, and absolutely deadly when protecting the people he loved. The fake officers had no idea they had just threatened the wrong woman in front of the wrong man. Marcus began planning his next moves, considering every possible outcome and preparing to show these criminals exactly what happened when someone made the mistake of targeting a Navy SEAL's family.